I would also like to invite Miss Esse. I would like to invite Dolapo to the stage. To pipeline matching for individuals with disabilities, and they also work extensively with universities to build. And so hopefully the mic doesn't cut for the productions, but I will like each of the panelists to introduce themselves.
We have more percentage of, I don't know, people that are a bit uneducated, like a larger percentage of uneducated people are within that group. And then it's nice to just focus on the skill that they've acquired, maybe vocational skills and all that, what they can do, and then not necessarily the certificate. Then another approach is, yeah, I know organizations do graduate training, internship, yeah. It would really be nice if we have one tailored for persons with disability, and of course I'm focusing on their skill and what they can bring to the table. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that response, Maiwa. So you mentioned something about access to education. Stats show that people with disabilities are less represented in formal education. And so in your perspective, what are the opportunities for people with disabilities to equip themselves with the skills that are required in the workplace? And also, how can different organizations support a skills development journey for people with disabilities?
Okay, thank you, Rotimi. So I'll start with the second question. Okay, I'll start with the first one. And I'll start by using this phrase, like when life gives you lemon, you just make lemonades out of it. So what that means is I would charge that you look at the skill in demand. I know there are so many digital skill in demand, and thankfully workplace has moved from the traditional setting to we now have remote work. So it's nice to look at skills in demand and see how you can tailor your skill to the job opportunities that are out there. So we're looking at their digital skills, videography, you know, those skills does not necessarily require you moving out of your house. Because if we're speaking about disability, we're also talking about, there are also institutional problems like mobility from one location to another. So it's great that the workplace has moved from the traditional setting. We now have flexible arrangements. So that would be my take on that, yeah. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that response. I would like to pass it over to Barrister Justice. So Maiwa briefly mentioned some of the challenges that people with disabilities face in developing their skills. And there's of course challenges that are posed within different institutional contexts. So from your seasoned legal background, what are some of the legal challenges to making disability inclusion systematic across Nigerian workplaces?
The challenges, there are quite a few of them, or there are plenty of them, but I'll just mention a few because of time or the lack of it. Now, the first challenge that we all know is money, lack of funds. We find out that many of the institutions do not have inclusive environment. They do not have an environment that is accessible for persons with disability. So where a person with disability comes seeking for employment, when they check it out, they place it in upstairs. There is no lift, there is no ramp, there is nothing. They just tell him you should go and rest. Or they tell him one excuse or the other. So you find out now, actually lack of money in that the institutions are, since they have made a grievous mistake in the first instance in building that facility, making reasonable accommodation, remodeling it, we actually require a lot of funds, and many people are not committed to that funds. We also have ignorance, even though you say ignorance of the law is not an excuse. We also have the delay in judicial system, our poor judicial system, whereby someone considers that, my rights have been violated, but going to court is expensive, and who knows when it will end. You just decide to leave it for God. Some time ago, it's a human rights case that we instituted. Within few months, we got judgment. But just when we are about celebrating, we were hit with an appeal. It's been up to 6 months now. The appeal court has not given a date, not to mention continuation with the case. We also have deep societal prejudice. We live in a climate whereby people consider persons with disability either as a bad omen or people that will never amount to anything. So because that is deep-rooted in their beliefs and their culture, so it actually takes a time. The law may be there. The law actually made some provisions, adequate provisions, to cater for the welfare of persons with disability and to ensure that they have a seamless working environment in a dignified environment. But because of a deep-rooted prejudice, which will actually need some education, rehabilitation to be able to overcome these particular challenges. So you find out that, okay, let me illustrate it like this way. Just last week, someone directed a client to me. She's needing intervention in her criminal matter. As soon as she saw me, I was coming out from another court, and the person that pointed out to my direction. And then when she was about to meet me, when she discovered that I was actually a person with disability, she did as right and moved to another person. I don't know why. Probably she thought that a person with disability, a lawyer with disability, cannot take up her matter, cannot probably protect her interests. So these are some of the prejudices that if you actually take the law might be there, but you can't put everybody in jail. The law criminalizes discrimination, but these are some of them.
Thank you very much for that response. So you've mentioned a few things. The lack of funds, that's of course required for mobility within real estate. You've mentioned the lack of education. A lot of individuals have misconstrued perceptions when it comes to people with disabilities. And you've also mentioned internally within workforces, even if those laws exist, there's very low compliance. I would like to pass this question over to Dolapo. Can we explore more about the lived experiences of people with disabilities in the workplace? How do these societal challenges, how do these legal challenges influence your experience as someone with a sight defect in the workplace? And how do you think we're able to go from there?
Thank you so much, Rotimi. And I smiled a lot at the great feedback across the panel. How do you get educated as a young person with disability if your family did not let you go to school? So it starts from there. And then you're now this adult who does not have that skill that the workplace wants you to have. Then there's the context of at what point was the disability acquired? Were you already an adult who had skills, and then life happened, and then you're navigating life from where you are now moving forward? Or did you have it at a younger age and you've had to navigate schooling, navigate opportunities to get into the workplace? more and more, we're finding in the last 5 years plus, workspaces are embracing DEI. A big focus had been on gender, but now we're now having some strong focus on disability inclusion. I've had the privilege to, I identify as a blind lady, for those who do not know, and no matter what I look like. And I keep the last set of glasses I had on at the point of acquiring my impairment. I still keep it on my nose because it makes a good story. So I was always around those who could check whether my sight could be protected. So I lost my sight due to glaucoma. But my pressures were never checked, and okay, we're where we are today. I was working in an organization where, number one, we were not too many women, and I'm an engineer by training. Then there was the bit around the fact that at the point when I disclosed that I wanted to go get medical support, my line manager, who knew more than me, once he heard that it was glaucoma, who knew that there was no treatment, was like, oh, the organization would like to do the journey with me. So I got to keep my job, but that story is an exception. And when we examine and unpack what were some of the reasons why I was able to keep my job, not only keep it, compete with my colleagues, supported with whatever I needed, and they kept it simple. So this is your task, this is when we need it delivered, and the way I got from the assignment to the delivery was mine to define, and if I needed support, I could ask for it. But I could do that because it was a multinational organization, and my line manager was a non-Nigerian who had exposure to persons with disability. So I was an example in the organization, and since it was performance rewarding, then we could all compete and have apply for roles, demonstrate capacity. For where I needed support, I got it around assistive technology. And just to say how if the workplace is conducive for a person who has also the right qualifications, I was able to rise to a role that had oversight of 15 countries in sub-Saharan Africa. I also am very aware that my story is a bit different from when other people, talents in the workplace, acquire a disability, they typically lose their jobs. So even when the organization says we are inclusive, they say we have a policy, if you have an impairment and you need support, or if you are a caregiver to someone with an impairment, we can provide you flexible solutions. But what we find typically, and this is part of the reorientation that Barrister Justice spoke about, is that when you disclose, it's a matter of time for you to be discriminated against, and more needs to be done. Spaces that are getting it right, we need to highlight and celebrate them so others can emulate what is going on there. Spaces that reinforce unhealthy biases and discrimination, we really need to get to getting some consequence to that, so that maybe it would also be another way to reshape that. And I'll stop at this time, hoping to have another opportunity to share more.
Thank you very much for that detailed response. There's a few things that I've taken away, and the first is, in order to build accommodations for people with disabilities in the workplace, there's an importance of flexibility. There's an importance of co-creation with the individual to understand where there's a gap and build out the solutions that support that individual. And so I'm glad you've had that experience in the workplace, but as you mentioned, there's many workplaces in which this isn't a reality. So I'd like to pass it back to Barrister Justice. From your perspective, how can companies drive compliance with internal legal frameworks that are intended to protect people with disabilities? For example, after the disclosure of a disability that might influence work performance, how can Nigeria as a country set up the legal infrastructure so that private sector employers actually, as Dolapo said, have a consequence if they do not develop and uphold inclusive workplace standards?
Well, actually, the law actually has adequate provisions covering that aspect. you find out that Section 1 of the Discrimination Against Persons with Disability Act prohibits discrimination in any form. So whereby a person acquires disability and he's sacked only because of that disability. You find that's a discrimination. And we also, Section 28 also provides for employment on equal basis. So it requires a person with disability to have an employment on equal basis with others. And when you say equal basis with others, it requires that employers, private or public, should provide reasonable accommodation. They should make the place conducive for persons with disability. So whereby a person requires an IT to perform for optimal performance, you should provide a computer. Whereby there is a lift, or there is no lift at all, a lift should be provided. When there is a lift, they shouldn't just provide any lift. It should be such a lift that a person with visual impairment can be able to use as independent as possible. So you should have some voiceovers, whereby you tell him that we are at the 3rd floor, 4th floor, or whatever, and the workplace should have some directions, tactical directions. So you find out that the law actually makes provisions, even for education. It requires that where it starts is at the education. So Section 17 of the Act also mandates, 17 and 18 actually, mandate all primary, secondary, and tertiary institutions to make provisions, inclusive provisions, so that persons with disability can be able to go to school and acquire the requisite skills in the first place. There was this lady in FCGC Lantan. She got admission to go to a Unity school, but because she was having visual impairment, the school actually rejected her, but she actually got the admission. So we had to intervene, and it was only on that basis that the school even realized that they ought to have admitted her, and it's actually their responsibility to provide everything that will ensure that she attends school seamlessly, being it Braille, being it technology, and all. Then, finally, awareness. Section 2 of the Act mandates the the NOA, National Orientation Agency, that they should make awareness. You know, most organizations now will now say, as we always say, that ignorance of the law is not an excuse. They will also say that they are not aware of it. So the NOA is actually mandated to enlighten the public on the rights and entitlements of persons with disability, and they should also tell the public the contributions, the achievements of persons with disability, whereby you now tell the public that a person with visual impairment is able to attend to become an engineer as Dolapo. Or I met a tailor who is also visually impaired. The tailor will just look at you, will size you with his hands, and be able to sew a perfect cloth, and people testify. And you also find out that persons with mobility, having mobility challenges, have been able to attempt to become doctors, to become lawyers. So where people know, it will go a long way to reduce this deep-seated prejudice that persons with disability cannot achieve. Then, importantly too, our enforcement mechanisms is very weak. The National Commissions for Persons with Disability, especially, is mandated to enforce. In this climate that we are, if something did not happen to one person, other people will not go learn. So you find out that because people have been getting away with it, people have been discriminating against persons, nothing happened to them. So it's actually easier and more convenient for organizations, private or public, to send persons with disability away and not to employ them and not to comply with the law, because no sanctions at all. But whereby there are sanctions, if there are sanctions, other organizations will queue in, will not want to be sanctioned too. So you find out that the lack of sanctions. And again, organizations of persons with disability too are not doing much. So the NOA is saddled with the responsibility of information and awareness. They are not doing their part. Organizations of persons with disability who are directly affected are not also doing much. They need also to publicize. They need also to follow up. They need also to enforce. The 5-year moratorium has since gone. It has elapsed it has elapsed since, and then nobody has taken anybody to court as in now. Okay, there are a few cases actually. I've taken 1 or 2 to court, but the act is not properly tested in our judicial system, which is what we need to start seeing. So whereby there will be policy guidelines from the courts. If the court sanction an institution, a financial institution, for instance, that your ATM is not accessible and you have to pay so amount of money to so person, you find out that other financial institutions will want to invade, want to escape such sanctions, and will begin to comply with the act. And whereby somebody is unlawfully excluded from work, or is not provided with adequate facilities for him to be able to work and provide his quota, and then the institution is sanctioned or the person goes to court, you see other institutions will begin to comply. I think with these very few points, the workplace will be a better place for persons with disability.
Thank you for that response, Barrister Justice. I heard you describe a few things: the importance of Braille technologies in the workplace, again, mobility aids in the workplace, and really exploring the full scope of workplace accommodations that are required so that people with disabilities can thrive. I would like to pass my next question to Ese. With all these recommendations for workplace accommodations, what does success look like? For a company that is beginning their equity and inclusion journey, what monitoring and evaluation frameworks support these organizations understand how ready they are in creating workplaces which are inclusive for people with disabilities?
All right, thank you, Rotimi, and thank you everyone for your great contributions. So first of all, I think I'll take us back to strategy. So one of the very first things to do is to design inclusive policies. So you can say a lot of things, or you want to do this, you want to do that. If there are no policies backing them up, so some of those things might eventually not get implemented. So the first thing is to have design your policies and ensure that some of those things that you want to see, they are in the policies. And then when you do that, so from time to time, for monitoring and evaluation, so one of the ways to ensure that you're on track is to conduct, there's something called disaggregated data. So when you collect data and you disaggregate, maybe by age, by disability now, every other factor that needs to be considered. So it will enable you track if actually you are in line with the policies that you have designed. So you're able to identify, maybe for a particular recruitment exercise, we're able to recruit so number of people and all of that. So it will help you, monitor exactly what you are doing. And then sometimes it's also good to get feedback mechanisms. So what have you done? So you can do HRAs here, anonymous surveys, to actually get responses from your employees as well. And then one other thing to do is you do regular inclusive audits. So when you carry out your audits, to enable you identify if, so maybe for a particular year, what percentage of people with disabilities have you employed? What percentage of these people are even in top positions, management positions, so that it doesn't look like, you just leave them at the bottom. So regular inclusive audits would also help to achieve all of that. So from your policies to conducting your M&E using disaggregated data, And then to regular audit, I think with that you can, monitor exactly what you are doing. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And yes, Mayowa, the next question is for you, considering that you're in HR. So the arm of HR will be responsible for ensuring that any policy changes and any directives related to inclusion of people with disabilities in the workplace is actioned by the corresponding business units. So a question that I have for you is, have you seen any examples of this collaboration between HR and the business units working well to advance inclusion of people with disabilities? And if not, how can that process be improved?
Okay, so for my organization, I would say yes. But for other organizations, if we're going to pick like a tangible statistics, I would say a no. So I'll be speaking to the no. And the no is because I feel like organizations see they're approaching inclusion as charity. And that is a no-no. So inclusion should be approached as an economic strategy where you are having access to diverse pool. And when you have access to diverse pool of talent, you become an innovative organization. So that's that. So I would say no, really. Speaking to a larger organization that I know, but yeah, I like the fact that the LACPO shared that experience, and she said it was an international organization that supported our journey. So yeah.
So some of the things I also mentioned, talking about monitoring. So regular audits, like he mentioned, elevators that should be, disability friendly. So some of those things you can audit from time to time. Are these things actually in place? So for example, the stairways, do we have a pathway for wheels and all of that to make it, more accessible for them? So those are some of the audits that an organization should also do from time to time. So not just saying, oh, we are an inclusive organization. Yeah, thank you.
I would like to ask Dolapo the next question. So we've spoken about legal challenges in creating inclusive workplaces. We've spoken about some practical steps that HR can take in advancing this. From your perspective, you mentioned that you were gifted with the workplace conditions which allowed you to grow. Did you still come across societal or any perception challenges with your coworkers that impacted how welcomed you felt in the workplace?
Absolutely, yes. So I smile because, institutions in the end are made up of people. And if people have deep-seated biases of what personas can and cannot do, then you face it all the time. The different ways I have faced and still face discrimination is when you've gone through a process to be assigned a task or to be recruited to achieve an objective for the organization. So the hiring lead is confident about your competence, and then you come to join a team that once they understand your impairment, automatically their body language shifts. They think you are there out of tokenism. Let the organization say that we are working with a person with a disability. They struggle to understand that you can be qualified. They would rather undermine the amount of hard work that persons with disabilities do to upskill themselves and to enter spaces with the appropriate energy, with the appropriate competencies and social skills to appropriately interact with the space to deliver to achieve their deliverables in the space. So you have microaggressive behavior in your direction. You have people undermine inputs that they are supposed to give you because they are like, why should I report to a blind person, me that I can't see? You have things like, oh, you only have the opportunities you have just because you are the poster of inclusion for the organization. And you find out that these biases and this behavior is so unconscious that by the time you call their attention to it, they would argue that it's not happening. But you that you're on the receiving end, you feel it. Then there's the person who's fascinated by you and you become like a specimen. Something that they go and call, come and see, blind person is using laptop. Come and see. Are you sure this person is blind? I just saw them on the phone. And when you say that, oh, they're screen readers, there's assistive tech in place to leverage this, they go from fascination to disdain, and then they probably offer you an opportunity to meet a pastor to be healed in a miracle. And if you refuse to go, they now become angry. And it's now like, see, person who they try to help. We no hungry. You know, so we go through quite a lot. It's really, really tough. It's, you're forgotten more of the time until it looks nice in the pictures to be seen. But again, more and more, we remind organizations, and this also goes right back to the strategic direction of organizations, and then the behavior of the HR community too. While not wanting to scare anyone, acquiring an impairment, every single one of us are just one incident away. So why don't we plan to make it okay for everyone? And then we also see that put qualified people in spaces so that this very weird mindset that people are only in the spaces they are for the optics rather than competence will really be something that we tackle from the root. And then to my community of talents, citizens with disabilities, there are spaces that are looking for us to equip us, to empower us. Let's go there, let's upskill and go there. Instead of trying to break down doors that are so hostile, they can drain and truly discourage you. Are we still on a journey? Yes. But as I was telling Barrister Justice earlier today, we're not where we were 10 years ago. We're definitely not where we were 30 years ago. So for me, the future is bright, but there's a lot to do.
Thank you again for that response. So one thing that I've taken away from your response is that despite workplace conditions which might be unfriendly due to the general population and their biased perceptions, having supportive leadership and having supportive management can really help. Because being granted the opportunities to grow within your organization still requires an incredible amount of grit, an incredible amount of perseverance to overcome the challenges from your peers and people that should be supporting you. Do you have any recommendations for workplace leaders on how to address the social biases of the workplace towards people with disabilities? From my perspective, I think coaching is crucial. I think it's important for all employees of an organization to go through equity and inclusion trainings and understand what bias looks like in the workplace. But I'm curious for your perspective on that.
So I agree with you on the two, so I won't repeat those. Another thing that really should happen, that leadership should model what they say. Do you want to imagine when the CEO of an organization, when the chairman of the board of the organization shows up like in shop floor or in the general office, everyone kind of like acknowledges and respects the fact that you have leadership in the room. But when leadership enters spaces and you are intentional to speak to that intern, because you know that the organization is doing a program that is onboarding interns with disabilities, and you're curious, where is our intern with disability today? And everybody is looking around, and that intern probably is hidden away somewhere, just grateful to have a job, not wanting to get up and come forward as others have done, and now you've requested for the person. Then everybody now suddenly turns, the chairman of the board, the CEO, a business leader just asked for the intern with disability. That is modeling. And then they would observe how that leader says, oh, how are you doing? We know that we onboarded you. Well done for how you are actually qualified. How have you been finding it here? Hope everybody is treating you well. Anyone who is present observing that leader do that, who has been really mean would just be silent, not use me for example here. But that intern, if they're smart, will be like, oh, we're on a journey, I'm fine. And that leader now, as they exit the space, because they just modeled like the focus of the organization, right, in doing that. But as they leave, they're like, oh, just in case you ever have any problems, the organization is committed to making sure all goes well for you while you're here. So don't forget to use those disclosure lines, the whistle-blowing lines, the boxes, so you know you are safe here, and we want you to, I want to see you replace me on my seats as the chairman of the board one day, and everybody laughs. But a lot has happened in that scenario. Something has been said about what the organization wants to accept. Something has also been said subtly about what will not be acceptable. And typically, that same intern that people were treating shabbily, just because of that picture, that scenario I described, you would imagine that people will behave just a little bit much better going forward. So, what is the body language of leadership? And how often do they model what they say that they are doing? That is critical. Do you want to imagine how that intern, and I deliberately use the level of an intern, will square their shoulders and feel more welcome and do more? And everybody else who is not as well behaved will also do better. Leadership is key, always.
Thank you for that response, Dolapo. So again, you're speaking to the importance of executive sponsorship. These behaviors of inclusive workplace practices need to be modeled from senior leadership through structural systems that are embedded, like coaching and training that's required for general employees, and then that trickles down to ensure that people with disabilities are treated fairly in the workplace. So in preparing to wrap up this very engaging panel, I just have a question for each of the panelists. And this is about if there's any initiatives that you're currently working on to support the inclusion of people with disabilities, or if there's any networks of private sector communities, government communities, not-for-profit communities that are doing this work that you'd like to shout out. And anyone can start.
The first initiative that we are engaging, NBA Lawyers with Disability, is public interest litigation on the rights of persons with disability. So we know that litigation is very expensive, and persons with disability are doubly jeopardized. So many of them could not afford litigation. So we are open to whereby we take up litigation for where the rights of persons with disability have been violated, be it in the workplace or other places. We take up the case for free. And that's one initiative. Our second initiative is that of advocacy for reform of the laws and advocacy in the rural communities, actually encouraging persons with disability or children with disability to attend school or acquire life skills that we prepare them properly. Those are the two initiatives that we engage in.
Thank you, Barrister Justice.
So from my own end, the current leadership of the Joint National Association of Persons with Disabilities, which is the federation representing the rights and opportunities of citizens with disabilities, but community-led, right? There are initiatives going on there, funded by different funding partners, where we're being a bit intentional about our community understanding the instruments, the legal instruments that support us, that enable us. Because if you don't know, how do you properly self-advocate? There's a collective advocacy, but there's also the part where you are your own self-advocate. So do you know enough to stand up for your right because you know better? Then other initiatives are actively embedding a certain percentage, 5%, of youth with disability into existing programs, and we're gatekeeping what that 5% being embedded in the 95 means, meaning putting the guardrails to make sure that the 95 interacts appropriately with the 5% around awareness training, trainings around inclusive etiquette and respectful language. and equitable spaces so that everyone fully participates in a dignified and fulfilling manner. And the expectation is when cohorts like that are done, the 95% goes away more enlightened, because for the first time there is an equitable space that is delivering those kind of opportunities. I would like to shout out to the Chartered Institute of Personnel Management. The current leadership is also really big on inclusion, whereby they are recognizing HR colleagues, because that's the HR community, colleagues in HR who transited to impairments themselves and who have chosen to practice. Because in our culture, many people still believe that when life happens to you is a tragedy, so you need to go hide away. But people are showing up and continuing with life, and HR is a lot more sensitive now because there's a lot of focus in that. And then the last shout out is to NECA. That is the Nigerian Employers Consultative Association. I know that there have been a lot of interventions and trainings around employers, from SMEs to bigger enterprises. Conglomerates and multinationals already do it based on their home country. But a lot more intentionality is going into it. Things are being shaped, policies are in place, but people, human beings like you and I, but it can only get better. So those are the shout out and a lot of good work that is already happening. Thank you.
Thank you. I heard a few things. One's the importance of work placement programs. So I know Coca-Cola in Kenya, they actually have a work placement program for women with disabilities. And I totally agree with you, because when you have strategic opportunities to embed people with disabilities in your workplace, in cohort-based programs, you are enlightening the larger workforce, so your larger population, on how to actively care for people with disabilities in the workplace, how to actively engage with people with disabilities in the workplace. S.A. Maiwa, do you have anything to add, or is that it? Any shout outs or any exciting initiatives?
I don't think I have any shout outs to make. Not any initiative per se, but just to say that what we ensure as my name implies, gender and inclusion advisor. So we ensure that some of these things are embedded in our policies. So I can ask HR, do we have this policy? Does this policy exist? And then looking at the program we are organizing, Gender and Inclusion Summit. So we ensure that, so for example, we have a sign language interpreter here. So it's part of making everyone, feel inclusive as well. So you come for a program, you are sure that you understand what is actually happening. So those are some of the things that we put in place. I can't really talk about any initiative. Yeah. Then I'm also a research person. So when we conduct research, so we also ensure that there's an inclusive recruitment of participants, so that we are not leaving them behind in whatever program we want to implement or whatever initiative we need to design, so that their voices can also be heard. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. I'll be speaking to our workplace. One of the initiatives we have is the flexible work arrangement, where we allowed some persons to work remotely, and then some have flexible arrangements. But I'll be shouting out to Jonaped, because for the sake of this summit, because we wanted a diverse community, we're able to reach out to them to give us pool of their talents to support the summit, and then we have a number of them at the summit. Thank you.
Amazing. If you feel like we've done this panel justice, please give the panelists a round of applause. So with that said, I would like to thank everyone for joining our panel. And if the audience has any questions, are there any questions from the audience? Okay, there's 2 questions.
Good morning, everybody. Yeah, my name is Assistant Commandant of Corps Kemi Alawajet. I'm the head of SGBV Gender Unit of NSCDC. I'm very, very happy to be here. Precisely, I'll be talking about this topic on persons with disability. It is important for us to understand that we have a lot to achieve from this group of people. And I want to appreciate PIC for what they are doing, because if you don't understand where you are going, you will not know how to take off. So the PSC, I appreciate you very, very well for what you are doing. Let me go straight to the point. If you look at 2 Kings 7:1 to the end, you realize with my research that the 4 leprous men were engaged, to deliver the Samaritan from famine. I believe all of us here, at least we have, many of us as Christians, and we have gone through that explicitly. The group of persons living with disability, we have a lot to gain from them, and we must begin to harness their talents, their skills, in order to improve in our socio-economic Nigeria. If 4 men can deliver Samaria from famine, imagine over 19 million persons with disability, the socio-economic impact that we have in this country. It's unfortunate that we are not harnessing their talents and their skills. But with this in place, I believe we can do a lot and achieve a lot with them engaged. Nigeria is filled up with so many talents. But looking at the way it's being isolated, I'm talking of this group of people. We are not engaging them, and it is important that we begin to enjoy the grace that is embedded in them. For example, in Nigeria Security and Civil Defense Corps, as I speak, our structural design is already aligning with the persons living with disability. It's compliance. The one we have presently and the ongoing structures, we are making sure that all structures aligns and comply with people with disability. Why are we doing this? Is because the Commandant General, Professor Ahmed Abubakar Audi MNI OFR, is a gender-sensitive person and friendly, and bringing inclusion into his plan and strategy is giving visibility to the organization. I must let you know that NSCDC is ready to partner with every other international, national, and local community for us to making sure that we have a safe place for them, and we encourage them to live and have the best of their talents, engage, and make sure that the talent in them is not isolated. Thank you very much.
Okay, so thank you to my esteemed panelists. It has been great engaging in this conversation with you. And we will wrap it up after one more question.
Sorry, I'll be very brief. One of the challenges that was mentioned, okay, my name is Joy. I work with Wazobia FM. Okay, all right, so one of the challenges mentioned was funding for organizations to restructure their workplaces for persons with disabilities. And I just realized it is a real challenge for those that want to be compliant because it is expensive. I work somewhere where my nationwide head of news is a polio survivor on 2 crutches. The head of the Wazobia in Lagos is also someone on crutches. And when we had our Wazobia TV, one of the presenters was a dwarf. And so we've had, in some of our interviews, we've had people with wheelchairs coming. The owners have been quite inclusive. We've had 1 or 2 persons with albinism and all of that. But now, when you mentioned about structure, I remembered how my head of news would struggle to come upstairs because it's a normal, regular staircase. And 1 or 2 times he complained, but he still made it. And then, so I want to know, is there a roadmap? How do we do this for organizations where buildings as old and they are adding more inclusion, are becoming more inclusive? What way out? Because it is expensive to begin to redo 4 or 5, flight of stairs and all that is required to make a building, an old building, for instance, inclusive. So is there a way out? Is there any avenue with the law? How do we make this work for those organizations that genuinely want to make their buildings inclusive?
I forget which panelist described disability inclusion as needing to be part of an economic strategy. And so the way that I see that being done would be in the form of an action plan that needs to be multi-year long and includes different elements of disability inclusion. Part of it will need to start with societal awareness, and that might come with coaching and trainings. The next part might need to be focused on accessibility requirements and comes with the required investments to make buildings more accessible. And if there's a lack of funds, strategic fundraising initiatives which are required to procure those funds, right? And then in terms of innovation that comes from people with disabilities in the workplace and truly embedding people with disabilities into the co-creation of solutions supporting this talent network, only when those foundational components are addressed can you start thinking about innovation challenges, for example, and driving participation of people with disabilities in entrepreneurship. Only then can you start thinking about how work placement programs have a positive impact on people with disabilities and they're not subject to even more and more discrimination based on their participation. And so the short answer is, I think organizations will need to invest in building a 3 to 5 year disability inclusion action plan. And that must include several different components that impact the experience of people with disabilities in the workplace. We have one more question which we're going to take that came from online. And the question reads, are there applicable methods that any of the panelists have used to prevent and respond to discrimination of people with disabilities in the workplace? And the question specifically says, outside of awareness creation, what practices have been taken in the workplace to address complaints from people with disabilities?
Okay, so I can take a stab at that. So we will always still come back to leadership, because what's the use of reporting to an HR who now tells you that you should even be grateful that you're here instead of causing trouble trying to demand for your rights? We face things like that. Maybe there need to be mechanisms where there could be calling out of bad behavior, or like I said earlier, there are spaces and institutions that are a lot more friendly. While I'm not saying leave places that do not serve you, I'm saying that there are easier places to go. And more, I would like to invite our community to vote with their feet, vote with their money. If I go to I know we're speaking about workplace, and it's really hard because a business is a business with its own objectives, and people are hired to gatekeep different deliverables. So it might be harder, especially when you're not part of management in any way, to have the change we want to see. But I assure you, if as a talent with a disability, you remain excellent at your work, it would always speak for you. and then don't stop raising incidences. Don't let it slide. Also, be aware that if you report and no one does something about it, please expand your horizon and take charge of your own next steps. I found that that is also something that we need to do. We shouldn't manage in a place because I think that I do not have other opportunities. Because a bad, toxic space that is enabled that way, where you have no support, will remain that. So also there's the element of taking responsibility for the growth and the opportunities you want to see. The last thing I'll just say is, while spaces are really, there are not too many you can point to that are doing great, but they're getting more by the day. We're in a better place now than 10 years ago, and the future is bright.
Thank you.
Quickly, there have been a number of interventions that we have made. I personally have made. There is this staff of an electricity company that fell from the pole and he acquired disability. So the company, we are about to sack him. Actually, they have sacked him. But with our intervention and engagement with the management, they now changed his role. He couldn't, of course, climb poles and disconnect. They now gave him a different assignment in the office. And with that, and there are other also interventions. We have made quite a number of them. A workplace is actually a court that the person with disability was employed. They rendered him redundant. Of course, he got a government employment. So they were just saying, you don't even need to come. You don't even need to come to work. Just stay at home. You don't worry. Your salary will be coming and everything. So we had to, first of all, interface with him, talk to him, that he actually needs to come to work. He actually needs to contribute his quota. And he can demand that he should first of all explore the internal mechanisms, that some accommodation should be made for him, like giving him an office in the downstairs, and then so also providing him with a computer. And when he actually applied for that, it was granted, and we also followed through. So those are some of the engagements that we've made.
Thank you, Barrister Justice. If I can make one more sort of response to that question, is disclosure and accommodations, right? Companies need to set up an accommodations process when complaints are made, and there also needs to be a disclosure process that's readily aware to all participants in the workplace. And so with that said, thank you everyone for your attention during this panel. I hope you've been able to take some meaningful insights, and I'm looking forward to continuing the conversation for the rest of the conference. Thank you very much.